I wanted to sleep with my fiancé's father, but I didn't want to cheat. So I suggested we have an open relationship. Today I found out he's marrying my former best friend, and I'm lying in a hospital bed after a panic attack, wondering how one conversation destroyed my entire life. But before I tell you exactly how everything unraveled, I just need a small favor. Please make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. It always blows my mind to see where you all are tuning in from. 4 months have passed since that night when my life started falling apart. On that day, I walked up to Mark and told him we needed to talk about our relationship. I explained that I'd been thinking about exploring more open arrangements, that maybe we were too young to commit to only being with each other for the rest of our lives. I said that maybe we should consider seeing other people while still maintaining our primary relationship. Mark looked at me with this confused expression and asked where this was coming from. I took a deep breath and told him the truth, that I was attracted to his father, that I thought David was incredibly appealing, and that I'd been fantasizing about what it would be like to be with him. I explained that this didn't mean I loved Mark any less, just that I was curious about exploring these feelings in a healthy, honest way. I said that if we had an open relationship, I could pursue this attraction without it being cheating, and Mark could explore other connections too if he wanted. Mark just stared at me without saying anything. Then he stood up and walked out of the apartment without a word. I didn't understand what had just happened. I'd been honest about my feelings. I'd suggested a mature solution that would let us both explore while maintaining our commitment to each other. I thought Mark just needed time to process what I'd said, so I decided to make dinner and wait for him to come back so we could discuss it more. While I was cooking, I found myself thinking about David in ways I'd been trying to suppress for months. I imagined what it would be like if he came over for dinner, if Mark wasn't there, if we could finally act on the attraction I was sure he felt too. I pictured him pushing me against the kitchen counter, his hands on my body, showing me the experience and confidence that came with his age. I thought about different scenarios, different positions, different ways we could be together. The more I thought about it, the more convinced I became that this was something that needed to happen. Something that would be good for everyone involved if we could just approach it maturely. Hours passed, and Mark still wasn't back. It was getting late, almost midnight, and I was starting to worry. I called his phone to ask when he was coming home, to tell him that dinner was ready and we should talk about this properly. When Mark answered, his voice was cold and distant. He told me that I clearly didn't understand anything, that we were finished, that he'd come get his things in the morning. I tried to argue, to explain that I'd just been honest about my feelings, but he hung up on me. I thought he was just overreacting, that he needed time to process, that by morning the shock would wear off and we could sit down like two emotionally mature adults and talk, really talk, about what openness could look like for a modern couple like us. I genuinely believed he'd come to see that I was trying to be honest, progressive, fair. But as the hours dragged on and the apartment grew quieter, something inside me began to shift. Not guilt, just a slow, undeniable pull in a different direction. I lay there, wide awake, the ceiling blurring above me as my phone cast soft light across the sheets. I kept replaying everything I'd said to Mark, every word, every breath, every reaction. But my mind didn't stay there for long. It drifted to David. Now that I had said it out loud, admitted what I felt, it was impossible to ignore. The pull toward him wasn't subtle anymore. It was consuming, vivid, alive. I opened Facebook and found his profile still public. There he was, sunglasses on, a grin beside a boat, confident in the way only men with stories behind their eyes can be. Photo after photo, I studied him. A barbecue, a car hood open, his arms tense as he worked, the way his shirt clung, the way he held himself. I looked closer, slower. Without thinking, I let my hand rest low on my stomach. Just stillness at first, then motion. Small, absent-minded, but deliberate. Not shameful, not wrong, just a quiet unraveling in the dark. My breathing slowed, then quickened. The world outside faded. There was only the hush of the room, the rhythm of my thoughts, and the warmth building under my skin. And still, I scrolled, revisiting the same few photos, creating entire scenarios in my head. One where Mark accepted it, where we all sat down and talked like grown-ups and found a way to make it work. David and me exploring this connection, and Mark understanding, even supporting it. Another where David confessed he'd always felt it too, that the glances, the compliments, the lingering eye contact hadn't been imagined, that it had been mutual all along. By the time I stopped, my body was sore. My phone battery was almost dead. The room felt too warm. The next morning, Mark came back to pack his things. I tried to talk to him, to explain that we were living in the 21st century and that this kind of arrangement was becoming more normal and accepted. I said that many progressive couples were finding ways to maintain their primary relationship while exploring other connections. But Mark wouldn't even listen to me. He just packed his clothes and personal items in silence, acting like I was some kind of stranger he couldn't wait to get away from. When he left, I felt confused and hurt that someone I'd been so honest with couldn't even engage in a mature conversation about modern relationship options. That afternoon, I decided to call David directly. Maybe if I could explain the situation to him in person, he'd help Mark understand that this didn't have to be threatening or destructive. I suggested we meet for coffee to talk about Mark and our relationship. David agreed to meet me at a small cafe near his office. When he arrived, he looked relaxed, almost cheerful. I could tell instantly that he had no idea Mark and I had broken up. His first words were, "So, how's the wedding planning going?" I laughed awkwardly and told him that's what I wanted to talk about. His smile faded. We sat down at a table near the window, and I started carefully easing into the topic, talking about how relationships are changing these days, how sometimes feelings develop that don't quite fit into traditional molds, how honesty should be more important than social expectations. He nodded politely, probably assuming I was venting about some minor fight with Mark. I leaned in slightly, lowered my voice, and told him that I found him incredibly attractive, that I'd been thinking about him, not as Mark's father, but as a man. I said I believed there was a real connection between us, something unspoken but undeniable, and that maybe we could explore it in a way that wasn't shameful, but honest. David's entire face drained of color. His body stiffened. I'm sorry, what?" he asked, almost in a whisper, as if he didn't want anyone else to hear. I reached across the table and gently placed my hand on his. "David," I said softly, "I think we both know there's something here. You feel it too, don't you?" He immediately tried to pull his hand back, but I held on. I stood up slightly, leaned over the table, and before he could react, I kissed him. Just for a second. Light. Quick. But on the lips. For a moment, he froze in shock. Then he shoved his chair back with a loud scrape and stood up so abruptly that his coffee spilled onto the table. His voice was louder now, not shouting, but firm enough that a few people nearby turned their heads. "Lisa, what the hell are you doing?" he hissed. "This is completely inappropriate. You need to stop. Right now." I stood there, stunned. My heart was racing. I hadn't expected passion or immediate reciprocation, but I'd expected something. At least curiosity, at least conversation. Instead, David stepped back as if I were dangerous. "Whatever is going on with you and Mark, I want no part of it," he said. "I'm not going to entertain this. I'm not going to talk about this. This never happened, Lisa. Do you understand me?" I tried to speak, to apologize, to explain, but my mouth just opened and closed, like I was drowning in air. David turned around and walked straight out of the cafe without another word. Everyone was watching me. A couple in the corner whispered to each other. One barista stared with wide eyes as she wiped down the counter. I realized my hand was still hovering above the table where his had been. I slowly sat back down and looked around at the faces. No one smiled. No one offered me understanding. My cheeks burned with humiliation. My lips still tingled from the kiss that hadn't meant anything to him, except maybe disgust. I sat there for a few more minutes, alone, listening to my own heart pounding in my ears. Then I grabbed my purse, left cash on the table to cover both coffees, and walked out, feeling the weight of what I'd just done settling into my bones like cold rain. I felt rejected and confused. I'd been honest about my feelings, I'd approached the situation maturely, and both Mark and David were acting like I'd suggested something terrible instead of something that could bring us all closer together. That evening, I called my best friend Rebecca to vent about how unreasonable everyone was being. I explained the whole situation, my attraction to David, my suggestion of an open relationship, Mark's extreme overreaction, David's refusal to even consider the possibility. Rebecca listened to everything I said, then told me that what I was describing sounded disturbing and inappropriate. She said that suggesting an open relationship so you could sleep with your fiancé's father was manipulative and selfish, and that she thought maybe we shouldn't continue our friendship. I got angry and told Rebecca that she was being just as closed-minded as everyone else. I said that she clearly couldn't understand mature, progressive approaches to relationships, that she was probably just jealous that I was brave enough to pursue what I wanted while she stayed trapped in conventional thinking. I told her that Mark, David, and now she were all missing out on something that could have been beautiful and connecting. I said we could have had something special, maybe even all three of us together, if they could just open their minds to possibilities beyond traditional relationship structures. Rebecca hung up on me, leaving me feeling like everyone in my life was determined to misunderstand my intentions and reject opportunities for deeper connection. The next day, I went back to the apartment to get some things and found that the locks had been changed. There was a note on the door saying that Mark had moved in with his parents temporarily, that the apartment was his, and that my belongings were in boxes by the building entrance. I was shocked. I'd thought we were just having a disagreement that we'd work through, but apparently Mark was serious about ending our relationship completely. I couldn't believe he was willing to throw away 3 years together because I'd been honest about having feelings for someone else. That night, I had to stay in a hotel because Rebecca had made it clear she didn't want me at her place. Sitting alone in that sterile room, I started to wonder if maybe I'd made some kind of mistake in how I'd approached this situation. But then I pushed that thought away. I'd been honest, mature, and progressive in my thinking. If other people couldn't handle modern approaches to relationships and attraction, that was their limitation, not my problem. The next evening, I was in the shower, standing under the scalding water with my eyes closed, trying to wash the day off my skin. I'd barely eaten, barely slept, but the silence of the bathroom was the only place that didn't make me feel completely hollow. And then, he crept back into my thoughts. David. Again. It started innocently, like it always did, just a passing memory of the way he used to look at me when we all had dinner together. The way his gaze would linger half a second too long. The compliment he once gave me in front of Mark. "You look stunning tonight, Lisa." Still echoed somewhere in my mind, softer now, but still warm. I'd told myself it was harmless, that I was reading into it. But in the steam of the shower, with no one around to hear my thoughts, I let that version of the story return. I let it breathe. I imagined him behind me, fully dressed, stepping into the shower anyway, letting his shirt soak as his presence closed the space between us. I pictured the firmness of his grip, the weight of him, the certainty in every move. His hands wouldn't tremble the way Mark sometimes did. The water cascaded down my body, each drop more aware of my skin than the last. I adjusted the stream without thinking, letting it trace the contours I pretended weren't aching. I leaned into the tile wall, the heat fogging up everything around me, except my thoughts. My mind painted images I wasn't trying to stop anymore. I let them grow, let them deepen. My body followed instinct, subtle at first, like a rhythm remembered. I lost track of time. When the warmth began to fade, I was trembling, not just from the cool air, but from what I'd let myself feel. There was no denying it anymore. I stood in the aftermath of a moment I'd created and surrendered to, breath shallow, thoughts colliding between shame and clarity. That's when the idea hit me. Not a text, not a call, not another coffee shop conversation. Something real, something he couldn't ignore. I walked to my closet, pulled out the black lace set I usually saved for anniversaries with Mark. Funny how long ago that version of me felt. And slid it on slowly, like I was building armor out of seduction. Then I threw on my longest coat, black wool with a belt around the waist, and nothing else. No makeup, no perfume, just me, raw and sure. I drove to David's house with my heart thudding in my throat and my mind repeating one line over and over. Show him. Just show him. When he opened the door, I didn't hesitate. I untied the belt, let the coat fall open, and stood there in the doorway under the porch light, exposed, trembling, and defiant. "This is your chance," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "We could have something unforgettable, David, if you just stop pretending this doesn't exist." But the look on his face wasn't lust. It was fear and disgust. He stepped back like I was holding a weapon. His words came fast and hard. "You need help, Lisa. This is disturbing. You need to leave before I call the police." My lips parted, but no words came out. I suddenly felt like a teenager caught doing something shameful. My body, which just moments ago felt powerful, now felt exposed, ridiculous. I turned away in slow motion, the coat still hanging open. I didn't care anymore. Tears blurred the steps in front of me. I could feel his eyes on my back until the door slammed shut. Hard. As I was walking back to my car, still crying, humiliated and raw, I didn't even notice the group of men at first. My mind was spiraling. David's disgusted face, his words, the door slamming in my face. I could barely breathe. But then I heard them. Voices. Low at first, laughing. Then sharper, louder, directed at me. They'd seen me. They could see through the open coat. I hadn't even realized it was still hanging that loose. My body felt exposed, vulnerable, like prey in the dark. They started following me. I could hear their footsteps behind me, too close, too casual. I picked up my pace, but so did they. I felt their presence grow tighter around me, like a noose. Then one of them reached out and grabbed my arm. I yanked away, but another hand was already at my waist, fingers brushing the lace of my lingerie. My stomach twisted. I tried to push past them, but they surrounded me, laughing, taunting. Their hands were everywhere. Too many, too fast. I felt a breath against my cheek and then wet lips. One of them was trying to kiss me. I shoved him, hard, but he barely moved. The others closed in, their movements no longer playful, just aggressive. I shouted, screamed, my voice cracking as panic took over. My chest tightened, legs weak, vision blurring with fresh tears. Someone grabbed both of my wrists and shoved me backward against a car. The cold metal jolted through my spine. I fought back, twisting, kicking, flailing, but they didn't stop. They thought it was funny. In that moment, I felt completely powerless. A hollow body in high heels and lace, shaking, defenseless, and stripped of every ounce of control. And then, suddenly, it stopped. I didn't see where he came from, but someone intervened. A stranger. A man. His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. The men hesitated. I felt their grip loosen. They stepped back. And just like that, they scattered, faded into the shadows as quickly as they'd appeared. I stood frozen, shaking, coat still open, body throbbing with fear and shame. The man who stepped in stayed near me long enough to make sure I was safe. I barely remember how I got to my car. My hands were trembling too hard to fit the key into the ignition. When I finally locked the door and sat alone inside, I just stared at myself in the rearview mirror. My mascara was smeared, my lips swollen, my coat half hanging off one shoulder. I didn't recognize the woman looking back at me, and in that moment, the question I'd been avoiding for days finally hit me with full force, like a scream inside my skull. Why did I do this? Why did I walk into that night thinking I was bold? Why did I believe that seduction could fix rejection? Why did I think I was proving something, to David, to Mark, to anyone? I didn't have an answer that night, only a broken reflection of a woman who thought she was being bold and free, when really, she was just unraveling. 3 months passed. I tried to move on. I poured myself into work, accepting every extra task, every late shift, every impossible deadline. I filled my days with meetings, reports, and silent commutes. And for a while, it helped. I wasn't happy, but I was functioning. People around me started saying things like, "You're really back on your feet," or "Glad to see you doing better." And I smiled. I lied, until the day it all came crashing down again. I was in the break room at work, pouring myself a 3rd cup of coffee, when a colleague walked in. Someone I barely knew, someone who had no idea what her words would do to me. "Hey, did you hear?" she said casually. "Mark and Rebecca are getting married. Crazy, right?" Time stopped. I didn't respond. I just stood there, coffee spilling over the edge of my cup, burning my fingers, and I didn't even flinch. My lungs suddenly forgot how to breathe. My heart started racing so fast I thought it might explode. My ears rang, my vision blurred. Then everything went black. I woke up in an ambulance. The paramedics told me I'd collapsed at work, that I'd had a panic attack, my first, that I'd stopped responding for a few minutes and someone called 911. Lying there in the narrow hospital bed, wrapped in thin sheets and the buzz of fluorescent lights, I felt nothing at first. Just silence, stillness. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about Mark or Rebecca. It was the crushing realization that I'd lost both of them. My partner, my best friend, the only two people who'd ever made me feel truly known. And now they were building a life together, without me. I closed my eyes and let the pain roll over me like a wave. That was when I understood something I hadn't been ready to admit. I'd lost the core of my life, the center, and all because I believed I was brave for voicing desires, for challenging norms, for being modern. But to them, I wasn't progressive. I was reckless. To them, I wasn't honest. I was humiliating. To them, I wasn't free. I was a joke. They think I'm pathetic now. An unstable woman who blew up her life chasing some new age fantasy. And maybe they're not wrong. So, if you don't want to miss the stories I share every single day, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell. There's more coming, and you'll want to be here for it.